Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Get ready to be inspired, hear success stories, and learn tips and principles for bringing out the best in everyone.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra Rue. I'm the CEO of Rue Global Impact, and you are watching or listening to Human Potential at Work. And I'm so excited about my guest today. She's a very, very dear friend of mine and a very dear friend of all of us, as a matter of fact, if you don't know her. So you're going to really enjoy hearing what she's doing to change the world. So today we have Caroline Casey, and I believe she's joining us from London. You never know where Caroline's going to be these days, but so you're joining us from London today, right?
Today, I'm joining you from London. I'm on the way to Belfast, then on to Manchester, and then on to New York.
Oh, yay, coming to the U.S. So yeah. It's very exciting. And Caroline has a very amazing background. So let's take just a moment for any of the audience that doesn't know about your wonderful background and tell them. And if you don't mind going back, to, talking about your dad and your career.
Oh.
Just for the people that might not know about your really amazing background.
For sure. Well, listen, because we don't have all the time in the world, I did a TED Talk in 2010, which will tell the story fully. But it's a really important month this year because it's October. And in October 1999, I came out of the disability closet when I was working for Accenture. I had been hiding the fact that I was registered blind from the age of 17. And what's an extraordinary story is I was born with ocular albinism. And when I was diagnosed with the condition, my parents were very clear that they did not want my life to be defined by having a disability. And so they decided when they were choosing a school for me to send me to a normal school and bring me up as a sighted child and see how I would do without the label of disability. So I just thought I was like any short-sighted child. And I thought I was really bad at any form of a sport that required me to hit a ball and so many other bizarre things. But at 17 years old, because I had a whole load of dreams, as any 17-year-old has, and one of them was to race cars and motorbikes, along with being Mowgli from the Jungle Book and a cowgirl. My father, in his craziness, gave me a driving lesson. And that is how I discovered about my sight. And on that day, I actually didn't believe the doctor. And also I was like, hold on a minute, I don't understand what this is. And I also saw how the world treated disability, because that was in 1989. And so I understood that I had got that far without talking about my disability. So I decided that I would hide the truth, which I did for 11 years until I finally came out of the closet when I was with Accenture 20 years ago this month.
And when you came out of the closet with Accenture, how did that work? How did you do that? How do you all of a sudden become this different person?
Well, I really wish it was such a considered moment. It wasn't actually. It took me quite a long time to come to the decision, because I was in the corporate environment where it felt like that you had to be all perfect and all strong and all everything. But I had damaged my sight because I wasn't using the technology that's there, that's available if you're visually impaired. And I really had damaged my vision. And there's a funny story, because I went into the HR director in Accenture and I said, I need to talk to you because I can't see you right now. And she was like, oh, don't worry, we'll reschedule the meeting. And I was like, no, I actually can't see you. And it was really hard, Deb, because I think it was the first time I'd probably publicly asked for help, because what I was saying is I need some help. And that sort of led me on a journey, really. And I went to see an eye specialist, and that eye specialist said, look, you just need to give your eyes a break. I'm like, why are you so ashamed to be who you are? And he said, take some time off. And so how I took some time off was to fulfill one of those childhood dreams, which is I decided to become Mowgli from the Jungle Book. And so my whole career in disability business inclusion began in 2000, because I decided I would go across India on an elephant become a sort of an elephant handler. And you can imagine how crazy it was for an Irish, you know, visually impaired woman to be sitting on an elephant. And that got the attention that then the media were questioning about how I felt about disability. And that was my learning about what this group of 1.3 billion people, this tribe, this family that I belonged to, that I had rejected. And I understood the scale of the issue. I was ashamed of my own discrimination and not owning my own disability. But more importantly, I was like, this is dreadful. Why is it so? And I think because I'd had the experience in business and because of the time that I guess I disclosed that I was fascinated by the intersection with business and disability was, and why there wasn't inclusion of disability in business. I just couldn't understand it. And so that started my journey. So my journey as a disability business activist started on the back of an elephant. So what a way to launch.
I agree. And what a way to fulfill your dream. So it reminds me when the doctors told my husband and I that our daughter had Down syndrome, I went into total denial about it. And I remember driving through with my beautiful little baby girl. I drove through a drive-through, and the young girl behind the counter said, "Does your baby have Down syndrome?" And I wanted to drive like a crazy woman out of the parking lot. I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want anybody to decide my daughter. It was a tragedy. And I remember people would hear and they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry." And it's like, no. And so I was the same with you. I didn't understand. Why does this have to be hard? I don't understand. We're these fragile human beings, and sometimes we see better, we hear better. It's the wonder of being a human being. So I remember I was on the board. I was on the board of the USBLN for 6 years on their board of directors. It's now the name is now Disability:(IN). And in the United States, they're a big business-to-business disability persons leadership organization. And I remember starting to hear about you and what you were doing in Ireland. And I remember we were really fascinated about what you're actually doing in Ireland. And it's like, how is she getting all these CEOs to the table? So I want to talk a lot more about the Valuable 500, but just for a moment, I want you to talk a little bit about what you were doing, because I remember we were stunned in the United States with the progress that you made in Ireland.
You know, sometimes there's a great expression, the less you know, the more you believe. And when I tumbled out of the disability closet, my naivety was about the scale of the issue and the scale of disability being excluded from business. Because I come from, my father was an entrepreneur, and I was working in the business world, and I understood how business worked. And I'm just like, hold on a minute. If you have 1.3 billion people in the world who experience disability, they're also suppliers and consumers and talent and members of the community, like anybody else. And I was really fascinated why disability had been so significantly framed in a medical model or a charity model, because I couldn't relate to it. So I think my premise of the work that I have done, that all of us have done, is that business is one of the most powerful forces on the planet. If it sees our value and if it includes, society will include. And therefore, what I saw as trigger points to getting business attention was 3 significant pieces. One is the current employees who are working. The second is the extraordinary, well-proved business case. So this market is worth $8 trillion. We're about brand and talent and innovation, resourcefulness. But the third one was leadership. Like we had seen where business leaders, and we continue to do so, really can push some of the social issues that exist in our world in a very meaningful way. And so I was like, well, why aren't you doing it for disability? Because yes, 15% of our population currently has a disability, but we are all going to experience disability at some point. Mm-hmm. So I'm going, so where are the leaders? And so all of the work that I had done for 17 years before Valuable, or the Valuable 500, was really about remarketing or changing the narrative or being part of this group of us who are changing the narrative, seeing disability as a business opportunity, as a strategic driver, as a consumer base, campaigning and storytelling around that, gathering best practice to proof of concept. But my obsession has always been leadership accountability, because in the light or the shadow of a leader, leaders make choices. Those choices create cultures. And that has been my obsession for many years. And yes, you're right. We had done, several initiatives that really galvanized leaders. And I saw that those leader peers influenced those leader peers. And I knew that if we could take what we had learned in Ireland or in Spain with Telefonica and the Ability Awards and really went out and amplified that globally, kind of like what Al Gore did with The Inconvenient Truth, or what Sheryl Sandberg did in Leaning In. Oh my gosh, what could we do if we could get a critical mass of leaders? What could we do with that? And I think that has just been a big passion of mine for a long time.
Yes, and thank goodness, because I also have been very engaged in trying to get businesses to understand this is really good for your business. And it's sometimes a real struggle. Unfortunately, in the United States, we have fallen into a compliance risk trap, as opposed to focusing on the innovation of, and the innovation of including everyone. We all want to work, and as the aging of America and all other countries, it's become so much more critical. We have corporations with 5 generations in them, and many of those generations have disabilities, and that's not a bad thing. Those employees they're very innovative, they're very diverse, they can add great value if you let them. So let's talk about the Valuable 500.
Well, the Valuable 500 is all those things that I was speaking about before. It was taking 17 years of work, building on the extraordinary advocates, social entrepreneurs, change makers, business experts like yourself, and saying, okay, what do we need? What do we need to be a catalyst or a tipping point to accelerate this position that we hold about the value of the community of people with disabilities globally to business? And so what it really was to try and find 500 of the world's most influential brands and their CEOs. We launched it in the World Economic Forum in Davos this year. The Valuable 500 is a play on the Fortune 500, and it is a leadership collective of 500 of the world's influential brands and CEOs to elevate the conversation of disability to board, executive, or leadership level, and to ensure that the definition or the work around inclusion is broadened to equally include disability. And we know one of the biggest barriers actually around this has been this very siloed approach to inclusion. Because one of the pieces that we learned is 90% of our companies are just claiming to be committed to inclusion, yet only 4% consider disability. 56% of our boards, according to EY research we did, have never had the word disability on them. 7% of our C-suite have a lived experience of disability, yet 4 out of 5 of them are hiding it. And that's 20 years later, after I hit it. So it's just like, wow. So the whole idea of the Valuable 500 was to get 500 leaders to be accountable. And the simple thing is, it's not about money. It's about accountability and intention, and simply saying, this will be part of my inclusion agenda. Whether I'm a beginner, a scaler, or a leader, I, as the leader, see it and I commit to it on whatever part of the journey I'm on.
I agree. And you've had amazing success. We're not at the 500 yet, but let's talk about what you already have done, and also who joined you at Davos to help kick this off.
Well, firstly, the most important thing to say is I am not doing this on my own, okay? We have a group of nearly 85 friends and allies all around the world, because this is global, okay? We have 8 expert partners, of which Debra, you are one. And that's really important, because to make this happen is we really need to work to collaborate collectively together. And I'm not sure that that is something we've been as good as we would like to be in maybe in the past, because it's so hard. Okay. It's so hard because you're worried that if I give to you, I take away from me. So that's number one. It's the most important piece. So I was very proud when we went to Davos to have 8 expert partners, 3 strategic partners. One is Omnicom, the biggest media group in the world. The other is Virgin Media, and One Young World, which is really activating the next generation who are our greatest allies for change. I had Paul Coleman, I still do, I'm very proud, as our chairman, and he is the ex-CEO of Unilever. We have Richard Branson, also as a valuable leader. Now Peter Grauer, the chair of Bloomberg as well, and a lady called Janet Riccio, who was vice president of Omnicom. So when we went with all of that excitement, we made history because we put disability on the main stage of Davos, where 5 of the world's most important CEOs, which was Accenture and Procter & Gamble and Fujitsu and Bloomberg and Unilever, all spoke on the stage about the need for leaders just to begin. And also there was a press conference where Barclays joined us along with those other organizations to say, yeah, we got to do this. So within the first few days, we had 10. And that feels like so long ago. And now at UNGA in New York last week, we announced our first 101, which is very exciting. And some of these are big global brands. All the organizations have at least 1,000 employees, but we have well and truly hit over what we expected. And we're already in a further 217 conversations as of today. Yesterday, we had 7 sign up in one day. So I just want to be really clear. The intention and the target is for 500. But you know something, Deb? Those first 100 are extraordinary. They're extraordinary because they took a risk, because they put their intention, they signed their name to that intention. Those first 100 early adopters, pioneers, and catalysts, they're the ones that are really sort of energizing the momentum that's building very excitingly now. And we have the World Economic Forum as a partner, the ILO GBDN as a partner, and you can hear it. You can hear the excitement.
I agree. And I joined as one of the leaders in the United States because so much has been done with disability inclusion in the United States. But I've been very, very discouraged. I know that I've personally invited over 130 U.S. corporations. Yeah. And I've had about, 3 sign up. And that's sort of, and I know that a lot of global brands, including American brands, are joining, but they seem to be making the decision from the UK and Europe as opposed to the US. And I know we're in this compliance risk mindset, but I hate to see my country not participate in this. And so that's been very troubling to me. And because such progress has been made in the United States, and I'm hoping that any corporation that's listening to this will show leadership and join the Valuable 500. There is no charge to join it. You're going to be featured at the World Economic Forum. We're inviting the CEOs that are joining. And yes, it has to be signed by the CEO, not the chief diversity officer. Not that there's anything wrong with other positions, but if you're committed, we want the CEO signing it. You have to be a corporation, the CEO has to sign it, and at least 1,000 employees. And, you know, this is so important for the community of people with disabilities to see brands are going to support us. So
yeah, I think, to be fair, I really do take my hat off to some of our very first joiners, which were Microsoft, Accenture, and EY, who I owe so much to because they did this incredible piece of research. I mean, that is exciting, but I will say there is a gap around American signups. And, you know, I'm kind of curious why, because the people I meet on the ground are magnificent. They're just magnificent. And there's some brilliant stories to tell, and there's some brilliant work. You know, what this is about creating this collective leadership group who post Davos this year, because we will be doing a big report in Davos. Who are the companies that have signed? You know, what are they committing to do? What are their stories? This is not about shaming, but this is galvanizing leadership. And I think the next phase is, so what are we going to do together? How can we drive system change? And I think what's really important is we're not asking the leaders to do more. What we're saying is be proud of what you've done. Own it as a leader. Own your story and join us together, because if we join all the leaders up, that's where the magic comes from. That's where the critical mass comes from. That is where we can see that disability will be visible in every diversity and inclusion index around the world, whether it's in the Dow Jones or the Sustainability Index or the FTSE for Good. It's where we can start really galvanizing it, because if leaders are proud of their work, or if they've not done work, it's just to say, we'll begin. There's no shame here. Nobody's trying to catch anybody out. It's actually not a celebration, but it's just merely about saying, wow, look what we are doing, and let's do more. And nobody's expected to be perfect. I think in America, there's such a fear of not doing enough or not doing it right. No, actually, the only thing that's not right is by not owning what you're doing, or not being proud of it, or not starting.
And I agree. And that's what I see. I meet, obviously, I live in the United States, even though I travel extensively globally, but I meet leaders and they start the conversation consistently with, I'm so sorry, we haven't done enough. And I'm like, oh, let's celebrate what you have done. Please tell us. And according to the CDC, 1 in 4 Americans identify as having a disability. Yes. We have to join the global and the U.S. national conversations. And so the more, and so there have been U.S. brands that have joined. Boeing has joined. I know.
Boeing as well. Yes, that's right.
Zebra Technologies recently joined. Tyson's Food. Yay, we're seeing leadership. But pretty much it's deafening here in the United States. I see most of the corporations not joining.
Do you know one of the reasons? I was talking to several of these very big convening CEO organizations in the US the last time I was over, and I love the honesty that I've been lucky enough to meet, because people have been very honest. And what they're saying is, Caroline, honestly, when we're talking about inclusion, from a leadership perspective, it really is about race and gender, and disability is there, but not in the same way. So they do say that. They are admitting that is true. And so my kind of intention is, okay, well, whatever you're doing around gender and race, let's include disability. Hold it up. We can't continue to do more and lead if we're just constantly hiding it away. And I think there's just that big fear around it. And there's nothing to be frightened of. We all have to start these journeys. I mean, Michelle Obama was only recently interviewed, and she said this great thing, which gives me great relief every now and then. She goes, movements take time. They take time. But you know something? They need leadership. When Sheryl Sandberg leant in, it's like we all in 2010 started leading in. It's not that we weren't talking about gender equality, but we needed the galvanizing effect of leadership. So it's okay, but we've just got to start, right? We've just got to start, you know, and I think that's...
The community wants to know who is including us, and not just the community of people with disabilities, the younger generation.
Yes.
They don't understand. And I was recently over in China, and I was explaining to them about accessibility and inclusion, and they were puzzled, and they're like, well, why wouldn't we include everybody right from the start? And I sort of was stunned. I'm like, well, of course you should.
Yeah,
I'm used to the conversation of please include us. So I know that you have to catch a train. So I want to give you just a minute to, summarize, and also tell anybody that's listening that wants to know more about the Valuable 500, how they can find out more.
Okay, well, first off, you can find out more through you, fabulous woman, our partner in crime. Or go onto the Valuable 500 website. We are so happy to have any conversation. So that's where you can go and get the help. But number 2, I just want to give a piece of advice. Every CEO that I have met said, why wouldn't I?
Right. Why wouldn't you?
So what we're seeing, particularly in the US, is there's a block in the system. It's not about people, it's in the system. My question is, what happens when this report goes out in Davos in 2020 and people's names are not on the list? Because it is fascinating to me when I meet CEOs, they go, 100%, I'm here. Because we're talking and appealing to the human that is the CEO. And when you're saying to them, I'm not asking you to be amazing, I'm just asking you to be inclusive. So my big kind of question to everybody is, look, this is kind of one of those opportunities we can do stuff together and learn together and create transformative system change together. So if there's an organization that you're working for, or you know, or you have friends in, please reach out. Because you know what?
Yes.
There's a lot of good stuff happening in America, and we really want you on board. We really do.
And we want to be on board. There's so many amazing things happening in the United States. So let's be proud of what we're doing, and let's join the Valuable 500 along with the other countries. And so, Caroline, I want to be very conscious of you catching your Uber or your Lyft or whatever you chose. And thank you for joining us today. We will make sure to put all the links to the social media, Caroline's social media, the Valuable 500, and the links to where you can find out more about it. But it's free to join. Corporations, the CEOs have to sign it. Nobody else. CEOs have to be committed. And of course, you have to be a corporation with 1,000 employees or more at this time. And then you can join us in Davos talking about leadership. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for everything you've done and sacrifice for our community. I know you've put in a lot of your own money, as I have, and really fighting for this community. And I am very grateful for you. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, I'm giving you a really big hug, LaRue. So my nickname for LaRue. Thank you for everything, for your leadership and your commitment, and mostly your friendship.
Thank you. I feel the same way. Bye, everyone.